Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hi. I am really excited to talk with you today. We, as you know, and many people out there know, we just finished up our branding and launch of our new website, in large part thanks to you and your team. And I know you and I today were thinking, we've been talking recently about this ourselves and thought it'd be a fun thing to talk about with other folks too, which is this question about operational leadership and how it is important to all work, especially social impact work, how it can really drive missions forward. And so yeah, I'm curious how you think about Friday's approach to that, how maybe you're different than other social impact works and how you think about that and what's the importance of making sure that not only are we being outward and visionary, but also getting the details done in our work.
Yeah, it's a super interesting one for me because I have an interesting personal journey with this topic too. Being a project manager by training as some of my first roles and then moving into leadership positions, I've had moments where I've questioned whether it was appropriate for me to be a leader, given that I'm like the behind the scenes executor. And so for a lot of my career, I've been sort of the partner in crime or like the person behind the scenes, and have, been fortunate to have partners and leaders and clients who have recognized the importance of that like operational excellence. And so it's something that has been a part of Friday from the beginning. And, I think when we think about this as far as clients go, there is your brand promise, what you say you're going to put out into the world, and we can work to create a really exciting one. But if you can't execute on it, we're not doing our job in setting you up for that. And we feel the same way about our own brand promise in that, we want to be the people who set you up to execute on that brand promise.
Yeah, it's funny how where some of us come from. I came from my first few jobs were as an executive assistant. Sort of literally as an assistant initially behind a desk in entertainment, and then on a political campaign in the fundraising office where I was interacting with everyone from celebrities and senators, and worked for a senator myself to just like the volunteer, senior citizen that was helping us stuff envelopes in the office. And then from there, worked in a lot of roles like you, where I also had to do project management. And more than anything, I think roles where getting the details right was really important, right? And felt kind of high stakes. And I think we've taken that into our work. And I think similar to you, there are a lot of people that work in the search and hiring space who, can sell a job, can get someone excited, can have good relationships with people. That's all really important. But one of the things I know that we feel distinguishes us, and that I know at Friday really distinguishes you, is making sure that all those nitty gritty details are done, the less sexy stuff behind the scenes, mostly because it's really easy to forget those pieces. And then in our world, a candidate misses an interview or there's a miscommunication, someone gets upset because they don't, that what they understood about a job or what they understood about a candidate is not what they actually came to
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like you, people are, nonprofit budgets are tight. People are putting a lot of resources towards our services. And so one of the things we think a lot about as a team is how are we ensuring that we're efficient, that we have great systems, that we are creating good relationships and being great champions of work in the world, but that we're also behind the scenes keeping everything running. And I guess I wonder, like, what is the danger you think on the brand promise side to someone not having those details locked up, either because they have a firm that isn't working well with them or they themselves aren't executing on it?
Yeah. So, for us, we think, especially when you're doing brand work, communications, website, like they are an expression of your identity, and organizations have an identity too. And so I often describe us as like organizational therapists. And as any good therapist knows, like a lot about the success of that is the process itself. And so we work to be really transparent about that process. We work to be really, really intentional about who and when and how stakeholders are being engaged. We think strategically about how do we set expectations for our norms and all of those things, because we have run former organizations run processes where you reveal this big exciting brand promise, but you don't have a team behind it because nobody was with you for the journey. And that, I think goes into the second part of your question, which is, well, what does it mean if the brand promise isn't being lived out for an organization? And what we've seen is that a couple things. One, if your staff and your team isn't behind, your board isn't behind that brand promise, you're going to start like rowing in different directions in ways that are just going to undermine it from the get-go. Even if your team is behind it, but you're struggling to like effectively execute on it, you're going to start getting reputation challenges. And those might be slower to appear than maybe like internal dissension or lack of alignment, but they will appear, and it's going to impact your ability to fundraise. It's going to impact your ability to recruit people to participate in your services, even if they're free services. Everyone is, as we know, strapped for like time and the value that you can bring to someone. They're probably weighing multiple different options and avenues for that, even in the social impact sector. And reputation is a key asset in making sure that if you truly believe what you have to offer is the best for a certain group, you've got to maintain that reputation.
I love that. And as you know, we do a lot of that in our search processes too. I think similar to you, I talk about myself as a family therapist because we're often coming into a moment, or grief counselor, or both. We're often coming into a moment where you've got maybe a beloved leader, or maybe there's just a lot of feelings about a transition, and leadership transitions feel very personal for everyone in a community, whether it's staff or people benefiting from a program, or if it's a school, it's kids and families, right, that are there every day. So I totally agree with you that paying attention to the people is really important, and having good systems and routinized processes, as much as it might feel not as exciting as doing something different each time, can help you make sure that you're not missing anything and that you are including all the folks that need to be included along the way and giving them actual authentic opportunities to engage, because you're making space for that and ensuring that it happens and not letting anything fall through the cracks. One final piece that I think you and I have talked about that it's interesting is, we've both seen this. We're in this funny space where we run private businesses, but our clients are mission driven, mostly nonprofits. And having worked in the nonprofit space most of my career, pretty much all of my career, aside from the fact that I've run a business in the nonprofit space, so having worked in the mission driven space, there's often a prejudice against mission driven work, that it's less rigorous or people are less committed in some way. I think, I even find sometimes there's a little bit of condescension from board members occasionally around, well, people should just be happy to get this job because it does good. Or, there's just not always a respect for the rigor of the mission-driven sector. And I know, talking to you, you have some thoughts about how holding a higher standard around operations and details can really help us in our space, especially in this competitive moment. But yeah, I'm just curious how you look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would be super curious to hear how you see this show up in hiring dynamics as well. But I think a good example is, prioritizing storytelling over marketing operations, right? And so our team works really hard to think about both of those. An example that I think of often is how we've introduced our clients to tools like Zapier and, email automations, because if our goal is to do good, which it is, the more we can free ourselves up to do more of that good, the better. And so we think a lot about the efficiencies that, for-profit companies, I think, often think about efficiency as like return on investment, like increasing the profit margin. But we like to think about efficiencies in the social impact sector as you're increasing your return on investment, like in good, and your ability to like drive that impact. And so we think a lot about how do we set our clients up for success in those ways and introduce them to tools that may be less familiar if, hasn't consistently been a priority throughout their career.
Yeah, I think, one of the great examples of our partnership was using Monday.com, right? We really quickly realized, oh, we use the same project management system. Awesome. And use that as our way to work with each other. Or with our clients, we, for example, we use Google Sites, right, as our one-stop shop portal. So traditionally in search, you've got, folders and files, different places. And in the old days, we would print everything out because we all met in person, right? Yep. But even once we transitioned to being in groups, it was like, where's the box folder or the drive folder, and where's the link and the access for this thing? So we were like, we're just going to use a Google site, right? And everyone gets one login and they access it. So I think you're right. We are, we're not using AI to screen resumes or to talk to people or anything, but we are trying to use some tools around AI to even more effectively reach the people we need to reach in sourcing, or to help us sometimes summarize or pull information and data together in a way that's really easy for people to understand. So I think it is really important that we're leveraging those tools and sharing them back with clients for their benefit.
Hmm.
Well, I just want to thank you again. I feel like the partnership with Friday was so amazing for us. If folks want to check out our agilitysearch.com website, Friday is behind all of the branding and the messaging and the logo. I know you all are at Friday.us. People should also check out your materials and your brand information. Yeah, any other thoughts before we wrap up?
The only thing, Christine, that I was thinking about too is in some ways there's like the efficiency, attention to detail, but I also love the way for you all that shows up in like the way that you all work to reduce bias in process. And so I was wondering if that's something you might speak to as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think what I always like to say is, traditionally we think of like diversity, equity, inclusion, and people say, do you have an equity statement or do you have a policy or a procedure? And we do. But I think so many of these things are actually about process. So I really appreciate you bringing that to mind. It's having a rigor around how are we ensuring that our pools are really diverse and expansive and representing a very high bar of quality of people meeting the bar, but also a broad range of different kinds of individuals that meet that bar. How are we ensuring that we're transparent and equitable and how we're implementing processes? And that's having tools and that's having systems and that's making sure that everyone goes through the same steps and that we have documentation of those steps along the way so that we're ensuring that if bias is occurring, we're able to catch it really quickly and respond to it. That's having conversations with people too about what are the systems we're going to put in place as a search committee or hiring team at an organization to ensure that we're being aware of bias and working with that together. And then it's making sure that you're including all the right voices so we're not just favoring those in certain position or in certain parts of the organization as we go through it. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. I love the way that structure can lead to more equitable and thoughtful outcomes too.
Yeah, it's funny because I often think about with our work, there's a lot of personal opinion that comes into whether you like creative. And so we've worked really hard to think about how do we provide like structure and process to decision making around things that people often assume are more just like gut judgment, I like it or I don't. And different kind of bias, but similar, right? We all bring like our personal preferences to writing style, the way we like to navigate websites, etc. And we work hard to create structures to help people provide feedback, engage those items in a more like strategic way.
Definitely. Well, thanks, Elizabeth. We'd love to do a series, so we may do some other snippets like this for folks
Sounds
around kind
fun.
of some of our common thinking in this work. We so appreciate all as partners and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Awesome.
Thanks.